Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Everyone has been doing, all the content creators have been doing extensive coverage on Bryan Kohberger. And of course, the plea deal was a little bit of a shock to most people, as the families and most of the people that were following this case expected this case to go to trial and that the prosecution would go for the death penalty. However, that all changed when the defense went to Bill Thompson, the district attorney of Moscow, Idaho, and they approached him with the chance of a plea deal. And sure enough, that's what happened. But now Bryan Kohberger will be sentenced on July 23rd by Judge Hippler, who I think was a fine judge during this case, and how he conducted himself resulted in a lot of what we're seeing right now, specifically the defense realizing they weren't going to get away with any of their nonsense. For example, the 4 alternate suspects, his alibi, a continuance. He granted none of that. And that's why we are here today. But many people, including last night, we had on the show Orange County retired Assistant District Attorney Matt Murphy, who's had over 50 homicide trials. And his take on this was a little unexpected, to tell you the truth, in my view. And he was gung-ho all the way for this to go to trial and for the Moscow, Idaho district attorney to go for the death penalty. And he was a bit shocked. He felt something had gone on behind the scenes, and he was very unhappy with it. And he voiced his opinions to us last night in regards to that, So you can watch that show. It's on the Police Off the Cuff site. But now people are very interested in and very concerned with, what will Bryan Kohberger's life be behind bars? I think people have this image of criminals, which in fact now he's a convicted felon, right? Going to prison, and this romantic vision of the big house of prison. I have none of that. I've been in prisons before. I've been in jails before. There is no romantic nature about prison, about the walls, about people, men and women, being inside cages. It's not really how people are supposed to live. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? How romantic is that cell you're seeing right there, right? So, and the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, Idaho Department of Corrections, Division of Prisons, and that's where Bryan Kohberger is going. And in addition to that, he can look forward to, he's 30 years old now. If he lives to 90, he's looking forward to 60 years of solitary confinement inside this state prison. So we're going to discuss that. So folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your thoughts, hold on to your feelings. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the Off the Cuff Zone, the Police Off the Cuff Zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting action. And with baseball in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting. From Major League Baseball, UFC to tennis and NFL futures, BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. Head to the website today and take advantage of the industry-leading VIP program with level up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. Bet online. The game starts here. So, folks, yeah, this romantic notion about what prison is like and Bryan Kohberger's life behind bars. What is that going to be like? And to tell you the truth, as I said, I don't really care. You know, uh, this man slaughtered 4 young people. Bryan Kohberger could spend the rest of his life in the Idaho Maximum Security Institution after pleading guilty to the murder of 4 University of Idaho students in a plea deal ahead of the trial. The Idaho Maximum Security Institution, located in an isolated area of the state, was included on Security Journal America's 2024 list of the 15 worst U.S. prisons, citing extensive use of solitary confinement, allegations of excessive force by guards, and inadequate mental health care. The cells in the prison have been described by prisoners to the Idaho Statesman as very clean, as they are washed by inmates, but they said the recreational cages inside the prison in 2024 had feces and urine on the walls and floor. A spokesman for IMSI told the Statesman at the time that incarcerated workers regularly cleaned the cages. The Idaho Department of Correction and Kohberger's legal team have been contacted via email for comment. Kohberger struck his plea deal in part to avoid being given a death sentence at trial and is expected to spend the rest of his life behind bars. So real romantic, right? But people are always interested in, oh, what's going to happen to Bryan Kohberger in prison? And to tell you the truth from my perspective, as I said, I don't care what happens to him. But as prison policy, as jail policy, I sort of think that solitary confinement is a bit inhumane. However, the act that he did, slaughtering 4 young people, was anything but humane, right? Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin slaughtered those 4 young people, took their lives in the prime of their lives as they were starting out on their lives, going to college, doing all the right things during their life. And so I don't really want to consider Bryan Kohberger at this point. What I'd like to consider is those 4 young people that you see on the screen right now. Those are the people you should be thinking of. And many people involved in this case really think that Bill Thompson dropped the ball, that he'd never wanted to go to trial in this case, and he was looking for that easy way out. Let's let him cop a plea. And we spoke about it last night with Matt Murphy, myself, and Mike Geary. And I hate to think that this case could have also been pled because of money, because this trial would cost millions of dollars. I would hate to think that. But when you don't know a reason for something, follow the money. And that's very possible that this was one of the reasons. Let me play this from a local news station.
4 University of Idaho students will be sentenced in less than 3 weeks. And tonight, the former Idaho Attorney General says Bryan Kohberger, the man accused, could spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement. The students were found stabbed to death in November of 2022. Yesterday, Kohberger pleaded guilty to their murders. At sentencing, the victims' families, witnesses, even Kohberger himself will have the opportunity to speak. After that, he'll be transferred from jail to a correctional facility south of Boise.
When each new inmate goes to the Department of Corrections, they go through an RDU unit, a reception and diagnostic unit, and which time their crime, their criteria, their personal needs, their mental situation, their health situation is evaluated. And then they are placed within the system by the department. I would expect him to be in solitary confinement for the rest of his life.
Sentencing is scheduled for Wednesday, July 23rd in Boise.
So the rest of his life in solitary confinement. Just unbelievable, right? Can a human being survive psychologically without the contact of other human beings, the conversation, the interaction, the socialization? But you know something? He gave up those rights when he took the lives of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. He forfeited all of that. So all the people that are just stressing over, oh my God, he's going to prison for the rest of his life and he's going to be in solitary confinement. I don't care, to tell you the truth. I mean, as I said, that the law behind this, that is the lawmakers, the legislators, whether solitary confinement is a legal thing. And you heard in my intro that the Idaho State Prison that Bryan Kohberger is going to is one of the worst in the country. You know something? You don't want to go to one of the worst prisons in the country. Don't slaughter, don't murder 4 young students in their beds, you know? Don't do that. And clearly, I believe that Bryan Kohberger, and I took some flack for this, but I think he's a psychopath, you know? If you watched him plea where he just, with his, a deer in headlights were his eyes, and he just said, yes, yes, that's not the behavior of a sane individual. And so he belongs. Life behind bars. Yeah, that's his new home. I want to play Banfield here with her take on this because everyone seems to be so interested in Bryan Kohberger going to prison.
Down somebody of my size, your head's touching one side of the wall and your feet are basically touching the bars. It's very short. It's very short in there. If you sleep with your head by the toilet, it smells foul. It's horrible. You sleep with your head on the other side, all you get is bright lights. So I mean, it's uncomfortable in there, to say the least.
And then I think there's one description you also said that if you decided to sleep, and we've got a diagram, up on the monitor here where you can see the toilet is at one side of the cell and the bars are at the other side and the bed runs the length. If you decide not to sleep with your head next to the toilet and you choose to sleep with your head next to the bars, did you say that the other inmates can actually reach you, can reach through the bars and do something to you?
Yeah, so that could be a possibility. I have only ever heard of that happening. I didn't have it happen to me. But the fact of the matter is Kohberger won't have anybody in that hold with him with the charges that he has. It's extremely serious. They wouldn't take it lightly and put anybody else in danger.
So when we look at the diagram, and it looks to be several cells all next to each other, and then sort of a common area with a metal table, and there's a TV, I believe, in that common area. That does not depict the maximum security area. Is that correct?
No. So if you look from where it says main gate to maximum security, the moment you walk through that gate, you are in the maximum security hold. Then right there in front of the main gate, there is a gate through that barred off corridor. Where the TV is, that's where the guards would always be. The inmates would be on the other side of there. So all of that is the max security area.
And it looks as though there's a camera pointing into each of those 4 cells. So, and again, just to be clear, those 4 cells that I'm looking at, were those all 4 maximum security cells?
Yes, they are. So if there is 4 inmates in there at any given time, they will all be locked into each one of those cells for the duration of their sleep. Or if they all are, if they're all confined to their cells for periods of time, they will be let out one at a time for their rec time. Yeah, so there's different ways they go about holding inmates in there, but usually, more often than not, a murderer would be in there by himself with nothing but his thoughts.
And at this point, it's accused murderer. I do want to ask you about the 23-hour lockdown that you said would be the standard protocol for somebody accused of rape or murder, which is the segregated area. Did you say that on occasion they forget about that 1 hour, that the guards get busy and that the inmates don't even get that 1 hour out to stretch their legs?
Okay, so to be clear, I what I had said was is there is a possibility of 23-hour lockdown for him. If he isn't locked down 23 hours, then yes, legally he is supposed to have an hour of rec time, no matter what, every day. The jail
Okay.
is usually overcrowded, and there's not enough staff to be able to get everybody in and out for their hour of rec time. So you either get it or you don't. I mean, it's pretty hit or miss. So I
Okay.
doubt
I
that their
also
priority.
Sure. I also want to
Sorry.
ask you about the rusty conditions, because there's some pictures that were put out publicly of the jail that didn't look too bad. But
So this is what it's like to get locked up. First you go to jail, and let's realize Bryan Kohberger has been in jail for 2.5 years. Is there anyone sweating that? Is there anyone going to take his cause? No, he was awaiting trial. Notice that in this, as we move toward the potential trial date, his defense attorney tried to do what you see on the screen: delay, delay, delay. So do you think that Ann Taylor, his defense attorney, knew that he was guilty? Would she, if he was innocent, wouldn't she be saying, can we discuss bond? Can we discuss Bryan Kohberger getting bonded out of jail while he awaits the trial? That wouldn't even have been considered. So do you think that Ann Taylor knew that her client, Bryan Kohberger, was guilty? I have no doubt. I think she knew exactly what he did, but yet she requested a continuance. She wanted a continuance because she needed more time. She needed more time to prepare the case, the case of the alternate perpetrators. Remember that? There were 4 alternate perpetrators that she tried to present evidence of when there was no evidence of it. Then she presented that to Judge Hippler. And then do you remember the continuance? She filed a brief to get a continuance, and Judge Hippler denied that. And do you remember she spoke about an alibi of Bryan Kohberger just driving around looking at the stars? Well, this is one of the reasons that this case, that the defense approached the prosecution to take a plea, because the defense felt that if this case went to trial, Bryan Kohberger was going to get convicted, and he was going to get the firing squad. He was going to get the death penalty. And I credit, and I spoke about this last night with Matt Murphy, I credit Judge Hippler with being a strict judge that operated on case law and denied all 3 of those aforementioned things, the continuance, the alibi, and the 4 alternate perpetrators. Had the judge not denied all 3 of those, this case, she would have felt good. Yeah, I can establish doubt. He's letting me invent 4 people that had nothing to do with this. So credit to Judge Hippler. I want to watch, to me, this was the highlight sort of in the hearing for Bryan Kohberger when he took his plea deal. And just he looks like a robot. And we all saw the movie Jaws, and remember Robert Shaw saying, a shark's eyes are the eyes of death. They're just dark. That's what Bryan Kohberger's eyes were. They were like a shark's eyes, just the eyes of death. Let me play this for you, and we'll watch Judge Hippler in action here.
And importantly, based upon defendants' explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, Murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonzalez, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered. I'll continue the matter for sentencing in this case. I think it was mentioned on the call Monday afternoon the defense wishes to waive a pretrial investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state also?
Yes, Your Honor. The state does not believe pre-sentence investigation is needed given the evidence that is available. We want to, though, make sure that all of the victims have the opportunity to make statements to the court at sentencing.
Absolutely. And certainly both the state and the defense may present whatever sentencing memorandum and other documents you wish me to consider. The victims will be given an opportunity to provide the statements that they wish to at sentencing.
We thank you for watching.
So that was a robotic, in my opinion, Bryan Kohberger making his plea, guilty. On July 23rd will be the sentencing of Bryan Kohberger. And more importantly, the families will get a chance to do what's called an impact statement. They'll make a statement to the court of how the murder or murders of their loved ones has affected them, has affected their lives, has affected the community. Right from the heart, right from the soul, these family members that have lost everything. And, the most, I think, aggressive person here, if you can call it that, maybe I'm not being kind saying that, but Steve Gonzalez, who I admire greatly, and his wife next to him in this photo on the screen, he's been the most vocal, and I'm sure when this is over, when the sentencing occurs, he's going to hit the wall, some psychological wall that is going to just tear him apart. He's already been torn apart, but the finality is not there. And we see this on the screen. We see this potential serial killer, and with the picture with the thumbs up that he took on the morning of the murders, gloating as sort of like a trophy for him. So this was somewhat of a game for him, And so much about this case we don't know, but we would have known if the case would have gone to trial, but that's not a possibility. And so we were looking forward to what's called an allocution, where the defendant is supposed to tell how and why and admit to all of the statutes of the crimes that he's committed. I don't know if that's going to happen on the 23rd. I don't know if Bryan Kohberger is going to be forced to do that. Will Bryan Kohberger even address the court? I would say no. He's a coward. He's a coward, and he's a psychopathic coward, right? A predator that murdered these 4 young kids. So as he gets ripped into by the families, by calling him much worse things than a coward, but that's what he is. Will he have the intestinal fortitude to admit his crimes, to apologize for his crimes? I mean, do you really need a mass murderer to apologize? I mean, how sincere would that be? And especially in light of all the the alternate perpetrators, all the falsehoods that we've been told as the true crime community, all the falsehoods we've been told as the Moscow, Idaho community, all the falsehoods we've been told in regards to the community of Moscow knocking down 1122 King Road, which I thought was so ridiculous because, then we can heal. Oh, really? Till you knocked, is it healing about how many students you can sign up for the University of Idaho? Or is it that you really care about the students healing? I think not. I don't think they're really worried about the students healing. So all we have really to celebrate is Bryan Kohberger spending a life behind bars. And I think we're all looking forward to the 23rd. I think potentially that, this could be potentially over. And I don't see it really being over, but for the families, I don't think we can use the word closure at all. This is Fox News.
No appeals for Bryan Kohberger after pleading guilty to the murder of 4 University of Idaho students. He will be sentenced 2 weeks from today, and we're now getting a look at his handwritten confession. Criminal defense attorney Donna Rotunno joins us now. So this is the document that was filed with the court, signed by Bryan Kohberger. We'll put it up on the screen. The top count is his admission to burglary. And then the second count says, I hereby admit responsibility to count 2, murder in the first degree, which requires the following elements. November 13th, 2022 in Latah County, state of Idaho, the willful, unlawful, deliberate, with premeditation and with malice aforethought, killing and murder of Madison Mogen. He repeats that for Kayla Gonsalves, Zana Kernoodle, and Ethan Chapin as well. But Donna, missing here is the why, or what led up to that night. And if we don't know the why and how this came to be, it leaves a very big piece of the puzzle unanswered.
For sure. And I think the problem is we will never most likely know the why. And I know that that's such a horrible pill for the families to swallow. Anybody who has been victimized by this, anybody who knew those girls, the community at large. But, really, John, the problem is in these circumstances, most often we don't know the why. If this case were to go to trial, we may have never known the why. The likelihood of Mr. Kohberger ever taking the stand in his own defense was very, very slim, I would say. I just don't imagine any scenario in which he would have taken the stand, and those answers would have come from a trial or otherwise. I do think that the prosecutors, as part of this plea, could have asked for some type of a statement from him. They clearly did not do that, but even had a trial happened, I'm not so sure we would have had that answer.
Well, as you point out, the prosecutors could have done it. I imagine the judge probably could have gotten involved in that as well, because there's also a public safety aspect of this. Sure. If you don't know what triggered this, if you don't know the background to this, was it something that happened between one of the 4 or all of the 4 and Bryan Kohberger? Was there a particular triggering event that could have been avoided? I mean, from a public safety standpoint, if you don't get inside the head of a murderer and you know why they did what they did, then you have no way of trying to prevent something like that in the future.
So I find this so egregious that District Attorney Bill Thompson didn't require Kohberger to ask him certain questions. What did you do with the knife? Why did you do this? Was it premeditated? Questions, did you have any contact? We spoke about that last night. There's no doubt in any of our minds last night, Matt Murphy, Mike Geary, and myself, that he was stalking the victims. And proof of the pudding is that he did 23 recons to the location. That's called stalking. And Bill Thompson made the ridiculous statement, there's no proof that he had any contact with them. Are you kidding me? This is law enforcement 101. It just totally pissed us off, I'll put it that way. Folks, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, share us with your friends and family, hit the like button. And if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we have a YouTube channel membership with 5 levels, and you can join the Police Off the Cuff Real-Time family. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Have a great day, everyone. God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.